Welcome back to The Lead, sticking with politics and some negative numbers on the president's handling of the Russia investigations. A new CBS News poll out today finds that just 28% of those polled approve of how President Trump has dealt with the probes, while 63% disapprove. Joining me now is Republican Congressman Brad Wenstrup of Ohio. He serves on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, good to see you as always. I want to talk about Russia in a moment, but first, you rather heroically tended to Congressman Steve Scalise last week after he was shot during that horrific attack at baseball practice last week. House Speaker Paul Ryan today said that Scalise is doing much better. What can you tell us about his condition?
Well, exactly what the speaker said. He is doing better. You know, the family and the doctors there will give a full report at the appropriate times. But it's normal for this situation for a patient to have to undergo multiple procedures. You stage these things, and Steve has come through them very well. So we're very encouraged that by the grace of God, he got blood in time to sustain his life and then get him into care. And we're grateful for that and for all the support that we've seen across America for Steve's well-being and the others that were injured.
And thank God for the two Capitol Hill police officers and frankly, sir, for your presence as well. Let's turn to the Russia investigation. Sure. You've been very focused on the main purpose of the House Intelligence Committee investigation, Russia's interference in the U.S. election. But I wonder, with President Trump calling the probes a witch hunt and phony, with his allies now attacking special counsel Robert Mueller, do you worry that the president is undermining these very serious investigations?
Well, what I worry about the most is it is very serious investigation, but I worry about the most, this is an American thing. It's not a Republican thing or a Democrat thing. This has been going on since the Soviet Union, where they tried to interfere with our system and our way of life, and they've done a pretty good job of it, to be honest with you. So our investigation, from my standpoint, is we want to get to the facts. What have they been able to do? They have a tremendous infrastructure, and they stop at nothing. It's all about Russia. And so we need to find out where they've had influence, how they've done it, and how we can stop it in the future. And then if there was any misdeeds done on this side of the ocean, then we need to know about that too. And that's where I think that we need to be headed. And I hope that we as a country will focus on what we can do to prevent it.
But I'll try this one more time. Would you prefer that the attacks on Mueller and the attacks on the investigations from the White House, would you prefer that they stop?
Well, I haven't really been paying much attention to that, to be honest with you. I'm focusing on what we need to do. I think that all I want to do is get to the truth, whether it's Mueller or whoever the case may be. I think that we need to somehow develop some trust in our country, and hopefully this will be a way that we can do it. So I do think that there needs to be an investigation. I don't see a need to attack unless I see a need to attack. And so let's move forward with an investigation on our end, and let Mr. Mueller do his job as well. I don't care to comment on it because I think he needs to have the opportunity to do his job.
Speaking of the investigation, there are new questions today from Democrats on your committee about Michael Flynn traveling to the Middle East in 2015, apparently to help negotiate a deal between Saudi Arabia and Russia. Is Flynn cooperating with your committee investigation? And do you know if he's cooperating with the FBI investigation?
I don't know the details of who he has spoken to. I have not had him in front of me personally in any of our briefs. If we feel the need to go there, I'm sure that we will. There is so much that we need to start looking into. You know, you have the whole situation of leaks taking place, which, you know, our country, that's not good for our country. We're destroying ourselves from within. Russia has a plan, and right now I think they're winning. It's heads I win, tails you lose. No matter what it seems they do or what we do, we are divided amongst ourselves. Let's get to facts. Let's focus on what has taken place. If there's some wrongdoing, then let's be about truth, justice, in the American way. But in the big picture, that's what we need to focus on, and we need to protect ourselves, whether it's Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, or any other adversaries that want to involve themselves and disrupt the American system.
I want to ask you, sir, I know that Otto Warmbier, the American college student who fell into a coma while in North Korean custody and died yesterday after being brought home, I know he was one of your constituents.
Yes.
His family obviously suffering through unimaginable pain. President Trump said what happened to Otto Warmbier was a total disgrace and that the U.S. will, quote, handle it. What do you think that means, and how do you think the U.S. should respond?
Well, for one, I'm grateful that at least there is some type of closure for the family. Otto was a good kid. As you might imagine, I heard from so many people who knew Otto from the day he was born, and he is a good man with a tremendous amount of potential, and there's a lot of evil in the world, and we have to confront it, unfortunately. And Otto has been a victim of that, and his family has suffered greatly. I intend to go home and try and be with the family later this week, and hopefully we'll bring some solace to them. But I will tell you, we have to, as a nation, decide how we're going to face all the evils that we're up against in this world.
All right, Congressman Brad Wenstrup, thank you so much, and please pass on our condolences to the Warmbier family.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Democrats are outraged about Republicans debating the Senate health care proposal behind closed doors, pulling stunts like this, driving through D.C. looking for a draft of the bill. But didn't Democrats do the same thing in 2010 when they were writing Obamacare? Stay with us.
The bill over the CDO, not letting the public see it, getting a score that's private.
Welcome back to Lead, sticking with politics as the White House tries to shake off the Russia cloud and tries to fend off transparency questions. President Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, finds himself under renewed scrutiny. House Democrats are demanding more information about two trips that Flynn took to the Middle East in 2015. One he failed to disclose on his security clearance renewal form. CNN's Jessica Schneider reports.
Democrats want to know the details about Michael Flynn's trip to the Middle East in the summer of 2015 and why he didn't disclose it on his security clearance form.
Michael Flynn.
House Democrats are demanding documents from Flynn about that trip where he worked to secure an energy deal between Russia and Saudi Arabia, and another one in October 2015, which he disclosed but left off significant details. Key Senate Judiciary Committee member Sheldon Whitehouse speculated Flynn's silence so far means there could be a deal in the works.
All the signals are suggesting that he's already cooperating with the FBI and may have been for some time.
It's a possibility fired FBI Director James Comey alluded to during his testimony June 8th.
Would closing out the Flynn investigation have impeded the overall Russian investigation?
No. Well, unlikely, except to the extent there's always a possibility if you have a criminal case against someone and you bring in and squeeze them, you flip them, and they give you information about something else.
But law enforcement sources have not indicated if Flynn is cooperating or not. House investigators don't know precisely when Flynn traveled to the Middle East, but they cite a discrepancy between this June 10th, 2015 testimony he gave to the Foreign Affairs Committee.
I just came from a fairly extensive trip to the Middle East, and this was one of the big issues that came up.
And the fact that he listed an August 2015 start date on the financial disclosure form he submitted after he was fired as National Security Advisor. Flynn's attorney declined to comment. Reuters is reporting the FBI is also looking at Flynn's business partner, Bijan Kian, in its inquiry of whether payments from foreign clients to Flynn's consulting company were lawful. Kian played a central role in Flynn's contract with a company controlled by a Turkish businessman that Flynn initially funding of how Flynn's company operated.
What do you want to get out of Bob Mueller tomorrow when you meet?
Oh, I'm not going to go into it.
You can respond to that.
Special counsel Robert Mueller is expected to meet with senior members of the Senate Judiciary Committee and others on the Hill this week to make sure there are no conflicts between his investigation and their own probes.
And meanwhile, the Senate Intelligence Committee just found out they'll be getting data access to data from the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Committee member Ron Wyden says it's the best way for them to follow the money when it comes to digging into any potential ties between the Trump campaign and Russian financiers. Jake?
All right, Jessica Schneider, thank you so much. Is Michael Flynn actually cooperating with Congress's Russia investigations? We'll talk to a member of the House Intelligence Committee next. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Lead, the Politics Lead. Now, you know you are on a need-to-know basis now, America. Republican Senator Mike Lee today took to Facebook to assail the secretive process through which the Senate Republicans' health care bill is being written by his fellow Republicans, even though Senator Mike Lee is supposedly a member of the working group drafting the bill.
I haven't seen the bill. It's not being written by us. It's apparently being written by a small handful of staffers for members of the Republican leadership in the Senate. So if you're frustrated by the lack of transparency in this process, I share your frustration.
The secrecy in this process has been remarkable, and what's even more remarkable is how much Republicans assailed Democrats for the same thing a few years ago, such as, for instance, this man.
This massive piece of legislation that seeks to restructure 1/6 of our economy is being written behind closed doors without input from anyone in an effort to jam it past not only the Senate but the American people.
Now majority Leader Mitch McConnell was one of countless Republicans raging against the Democrats in the early part of President Obama's first term for at times ramming through the Affordable Care Act. And make no mistake, some shady wheeling and dealing and red-eye voting went on to pass that bill. Not lost on us is the fact that McConnell at one point had to speak on Christmas Eve 2009 when the Democratic-led Senate passed Obamacare, you know, when all of America's paying close attention, Christmas Eve. But Obamacare also did face some debate, at least. The Senate Health Committee spent 13 days marking up the bill, and the full Senate debated the bill for 25 days. Now, that process was not enough for then Congressman and currently the Vice President, Mike Pence, who in early 2010 tweeted, "It's simply wrong for legislation that'll affect 100% of the American people to be negotiated behind closed doors." And that was right, what Congressman Pence said. And it's right now. As was this from then Congressman, now Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, Tom Price. Quote, "With Democrats discussing health care in secret, they're sacrificing the trust of the American people." Or, for instance, Senator Orrin Hatch, now the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, who wrote back then, quote, "The real bill is currently being written behind closed doors in the dark corners of the Capitol." I could do this all day, frankly, but what about today? What does Hatch have to say today, such as, for instance, this month when he was challenged about whether his committee would hold a public hearing?
Will there be a hearing?
Democrats have been invited to participate in this process, and we are open to their ideas and suggestions.
Well, I don't know that there's going to be another hearing, but we've invited you to participate.
The only thing that's changed is the party affiliations of those behind closed doors and those locked out. You know, if you apply a principle only to your opponents, it's not a principle. It's just a cheap partisan attack. Senate Republicans say a bill could go to the Congressional Budget Office for analysis as soon as this week. CNN's Phil Mattingly is live on Capitol Hill. And Phil, Republicans want estimates from the CBO before a vote. That would leave them with about 7 or 8 working days before the July 4th recess. Is that enough time to debate such a huge piece of legislation?
You know, Jake, the most interesting element probably of the last week or so is the number of Republicans who have voiced their own unease about this process, acknowledging it's too secretive, acknowledging particularly rank and file members have no idea where this is all going to end up, despite the fact that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell announced today that there would be a working draft available to everybody on Thursday. And there are still major key outstanding issues, major issues that need to be resolved before Thursday. An interesting element here is really twofold, Jake. First off, the frustration about the process. And second off, that they're not there yet. Take a listen to this.
Exists. But when the Affordable Care Act came through, so-called Obamacare, fellas, just give folks a sense of that process compared to this secretive.
Jake, one of the elements here is when you talk to people like Senator John McCain, very frustrated with the process, very sarcastic with us all day today, but not willing to acknowledge that they'll stand in the way of the process moving forward. Here's kind of the cold reality here. If 3 Republican senators out of the 52 tell the Senate Majority Leader, look, we need to slow down, we need to wait until after we have full amounts of time to digest the bill or have a hearing on this bill, then that would be what would happen. The only goal here is to get 50 senators in line. And if 3 say no, then they don't really have an option. Up to this point, despite the frustration we've heard publicly, no senator has actually come out and said that. And another key element here, as I noted, they don't have final agreement on some of these key outstanding issues. Short of that, it's tough to figure out how they're going to get 50 votes. But one thing was made clear by the Senate Majority Leader today, Jake, they're moving forward. They expect to have a CBO score at some point next week, and they expect to vote on this as well.
Well, we haven't seen a draft of the legislation. In that, we're no different than Senator Mike Lee. But Republican aides are saying that being considered are deeper Medicaid cuts than the House bill. Is that getting any pushback on Capitol Hill?
No question about it. Look, this is something that conservatives look very favorable towards, and it's how they would peg the growth rate. As it currently stands, at least in the House legislation, it would be pegged to inflation plus, or medical inflation, essentially. What the Senate is actually considering right now is pegging it to just inflation. Now, the House bill, Jake, would cut $800 billion over the course of 10 years. That has moderate senators concerned on its own. The Senate bill, if they were to follow through with this proposal that that I'm told is on the table right now would cut it a lot more. You talk to senators like Rob Portman of Ohio, Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia. They've made very clear today that they don't think they can support something like that. So the big question is, will that be taken off the table before that discussion draft leaves the premises, or at least comes out on Thursday? And obviously, we're keeping an eye on Democrats, too. You kind of highlighted their frustration through all of this. They don't have much of a role here. They can try and slow things down. They can try and draw attention to the process. And that's pretty much what they're doing today. We had Senator Cory Booker, Senator Brian Schatz, and Senator Chris Murphy actually go on a scavenger hunt of sorts over to the CBO office, trying to track down some of the drafts of certain provisions of this legislation in order to get some sense of what's in the bill. They've failed in that process, just as just about everybody in the Senate has up to this point. Looks like we're all going to have to wait and see, at least till Thursday morning, what's actually in the bill.
All right. Phil Mattingly on Capitol Hill for us. Thank you so much. One of the Democrats speaking out on the Senate floor last night and again this afternoon was Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon, who joins me now from Capitol Hill. Senator, thanks for joining us. In response to complaints about transparency, the Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said that there will be, quote, ample opportunity to read and amend the bill. Your response?
Hi, greetings, Jake. Pleasure to be with you. I got to tell you, it's incredible secrecy that we're engaged in. And I heard that clip that you had with Senator Hatch saying that we're welcome to participate. I believe Senator Thune said we were welcome to the meetings. So I've got my RSVP card here. I've already signed it. I just need to know what the date is and what the location is, because despite the invitation, so far have absolutely no idea how to participate. This is the secret 13 holding these meetings and deciding what's going to happen to healthcare in America with absolutely no committee hearing, no opportunity for the public to weigh in. This is not the way a legislature is supposed to operate in a we the people republic.
Looking back on it, did Democrats make a mistake by not opening the process more and having more debate and having more openness and transparency when Obamacare was being written?
Let's count the ways that we were open. In the Senate alone, we had over 100 committee meetings, roundtables, and walkthroughs. We considered over 300 amendments in a public setting. We adopted over 100 Republican amendments. We went to the floor with 25 days of debate. People held town halls back home. The public weighed in. It was about as lengthy a process as you've seen in modern United States history. This is the opposite end. This is 0, 0, 0.
Isn't this an example of elections having consequences? I mean, the Republicans control the Senate, and it does seem, according to many polls, that Americans do want Obamacare overhauled, if not replaced.
Well, I'd invite you to join me on my town halls out in Oregon. This weekend I was in 4 conservative counties, 4 red counties, completely open town hall. Everybody knew about them, and people came out and they are terrified, absolutely terrified of this secret process and what might happen to their health care. So I think it's very clear, whatever polling there might have been in the past, right now the Trump care is creating enormous anxiety and opposition at grassroots rural America.
What do you think Republicans could do that would satisfy you and your Democratic colleagues? Even if there were public hearings, you would still oppose their efforts to change Obamacare or undermine Obamacare on such a grand scale.
There's so many ways that the current healthcare system can be improved. So what I'd like to say, at a minimum, 1 month for the public to weigh in, 1 month for the 2 committees to hold hearings and take expert testimony, 1 month for us to hold town halls and discussions among ourselves and offer amendments in those 2 committees. Then bring it to the floor. That's not too much to ask.
So there are problems with Obamacare, you acknowledge, and as you must know, premiums are rising up to 30% in your home state of Oregon. What changes would you make if you could make them right now?
The first is that there has to be a lockdown on cost sharing. Companies are bailing out of states because the president will not commit to cost sharing. That's the difference between, say, a 7% rise and a 30% rise in the cost of health care. Second of all, a company can't go into a new market without reinsurance in case they get a disproportionate share of sick individuals. And the Republicans destroyed the reinsurance program in Obamacare. And so those are just 2 examples of ways that currently the administration and my Republican colleagues are undermining undermining the exchanges. And by the way, those exchanges were the Republican idea for health care. Marketplace where private companies compete. That was their idea. But they chose on a completely partisan basis to instead just try to undermine a presidency rather than do the responsible thing and work together to make health care that will serve affordable, quality health care for every American.
Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon, thank you so much. Good luck with that RSVP card.
Thank you. I'm hoping to get that date and time.
Georgia is on Republicans' mind and Democrats' minds tonight as voters head to the polls in the most expensive U.S. House race in American history. But will the results be a referendum for either party? Stay with us. Welcome back. We're back with more in the politics lead now. In Georgia, it is election day between two candidates who apparently don't like tough questions from the Fourth Estate, each banning reporters from their events in the final hours of the campaign. Kira Lerner from the progressive outlet Think Progress asked Republican candidate Karen Handel about the Republican health care bill, an issue that the reporter says Handel has been reluctant to discuss. At the final event that day, the Handel campaign blocked her from attending. Handel spokeswoman Kate Constantini told CNN that in the future, Think Progress should RSVP for events. On the other side of the aisle, Brent Scher, a reporter from the conservative Washington Free Beacon, fact-checked Democrat John Ossoff's claim that he lives down the street from the district he's running to represent but does not currently live in, documenting all 3.2 miles by Scher's account. And last night, he too was blocked from entering an Ossoff campaign event. Ossoff Communications Director Sasha Haworth claiming that the campaign did not see his press credentials. A grand display in Georgia of bipartisan petulance and thin skin, where politicians hide from challenging questions. Whoever wins tonight, it will be a politician whose campaign barred a reporter for asking tough questions. And if you can't take tough questions, maybe Washington isn't the place for you. But their ability to deal with tough questions notwithstanding, one of these two will be elected to represent the northern Atlanta suburbs. But who? With most polls outdated, there's no true indicator which way the results will go tonight. CNN's Jason Carroll is live for us in Marietta, Georgia. And Jason, many outsiders see this race as a litmus test on national politics. Even President Trump's been weighing in today. But the candidates trying to keep the focus on themselves and their opponents.
Yeah, absolutely. And the candidates are doing all that they can to say that this race is not about the other person. But voters know better out here on the streets, Jake, and certainly political operatives on both sides of the aisle know very well what's at stake here.
It's decision day in Georgia's high-stakes special election. 30-year-old Democrat John Ossoff is hoping to harness his party's energy against President Trump to flip a seat that has been held by Republicans for nearly 40 years.
With all the gridlock and disarray and dysfunction in Washington, now more than ever we need fresh leadership rather than another career politician.
Republican challenger Karen Handel is counting on the district's conservative-leaning tilt to carry her campaign to victory.
My husband and I have lived here for almost 25 years. That's longer than my opponent pretty much has been alive.
With the contest being so closely watched for national implications, both candidates have spent the closing days of the campaign trying to keep focus on local issues.
It is not about the national implications. It's about who is best suited to represent them in Washington.
I'm sure there will be implications. What those implications are, I'll leave to national strategists and pundits.
President Trump is keeping an eye on the race this morning, tweeting his support for Handel and charging that Ossoff wants to raise your taxes to the highest level and is weak on crime and security, doesn't even live in the district. The president isn't the only one weighing in on this. This is the most expensive House race in history, with more than $50 million spent by the campaigns and outside groups.
Candidly, that's pretty obscene.
This supporter says his vote was for Handel.
I think she believes what she says, and I think she'll do what she says.
While this Ossoff voter says he used his ballot to make a statement against the president.
Well, I voted for Ossoff. You know, just because I don't really like the guy that's sitting in the White House right now.
With just hours left, both campaigns are hoping to send a message of their own to Washington.
And both Ossoff and Handel know, Jake, that in order to pull out a win here, what each of them have to do is reach independents or moderates. At this point, it's just unclear how successful either one of them have been at doing that. The race is just too close to call. Jake.
All right, Jason Carroll in Georgia 6. Thank you so much. Just 5 feet. That's how close a Russian fighter jet flew to an American spy plane in the latest incident of escalating tensions. Stick around. We'll bring you that story. Information about what's going on in Brussels. We will bring you that, but let's turn to our politics lead now. This afternoon, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer held an on-camera briefing and took reporters' questions. That's something that in and of itself should not be news, but in this case it is, because the Trump administration has been keeping reporters at bay for more than a week. In important ways, the Trump White House has been less transparent than its predecessors. It's just an empirical fact. Even for those who thought President Obama's administration never lived up to its ballyhooed promises of transparency, President Obama did release his tax returns, as has been standard for presidents for years. President Trump has not yet released his. President Obama eventually acquiesced and released most of his White House visitor logs, but President Trump does not share any of them. Literally nothing about who is coming to see him. President Obama golfed quite a bit, as does President Trump, but the Obama White House would tell the public when he was hitting the links and with whom. This White House, for whatever reason, keeps that information private. Even the White House briefings are now shorter with more non-answers and a new trend of not allowing cameras or even audio recordings of what your White House is saying on any given day. People in power like to hide things from the public. We called it out under President Obama, and now it is empirically worse and more opaque. You have a right to know what's going on in the people's house, whether related to the Russia cloud that continues to hamper President Trump's agenda, or his plans for Afghanistan, or tax reform, or health care legislation, all of it. Let's go right to CNN's Jim Acosta, who was at the White House and attended today's briefing. And Jim, originally this was not on the schedule for today.
Oh, that's right. It was out and then it was in. The White House, though, Jake, did return to somewhat normal behavior and answering questions from reporters on camera today. But White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer appeared to create some news of his own at today's briefing when, incredibly, he said he did not know whether the president believes Russia interfered in the election, something that did happen, according to U.S. intelligence agencies. It was lights, camera, action for White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, who held his first on-camera briefing in more than a week. But Spicer declined to provide any real answers to a key question nagging this White House, whether the president believes Russia interfered in the election.
Does President Trump believe that the Russian government interfered in the 2016 elections?
I think I have not sat down and talked to him about that specific thing.
Didn't the president say that Russia was fake news? On North Korea, the White House tried to deflect any blame over the death of American Otto Warmbier. During a meeting with the president of Ukraine, Mr. Trump suggested the Obama administration was responsible.
It's a total disgrace what happened to Otto. That should never, ever be allowed to happen.
Though the president seemed to concede, his efforts to prod China to put pressure on North Korea failed, tweeting, "While I greatly appreciate the efforts of President Xi and China to help with North Korea, it has not worked out. At least I know China tried." A former Obama administration official defended the former president's attempts to secure Warmbier's release. These tireless efforts resulted in the release of at least 10 Americans from North Korean custody during the course of the Obama administration. It's painful that Mr. Warmbier was not among them, but our efforts on his behalf never ceased. At the briefing, Spicer appeared to blame the Obama administration.
The president believes that had it happened sooner or quicker, potentially there might have been additional medical resources that could have been provided.
On the pressing domestic issue of health care reform, Spicer acknowledged the president has criticized the House bill aimed at repealing Obamacare behind closed doors as heartless.
The president clearly wants a bill that has heart in it.
Democrats have seized on the president's criticism to slam Senate Republicans for crafting their own version of the bill behind closed doors.
President Trump likes to end many of his tweets with one word, almost like punctuation. Sad, unfair, wrong. Well, it turns out that the president has one word to sum up his health care plan as well: mean. For once, on the topic of health care, I find myself agreeing with the president. His health care bill is mean.
Even some Republicans have had it.
We used to complain like hell when the Democrats ran the Affordable Care Act. Now they're doing the same thing.
As for Spicer, he appeared to confirm the White House is looking at moving him out of the briefing room and into another role.
Right here, we're always looking for ways to do a better job of articulating the president's message and his agenda.
A job at least one conservative mentioned as a successor doesn't want.
Yeah, I'm not sure the press secretary thing is something I'm dying to do.
There were still no answers to the question of whether the president has recordings of his conversations here at the White House. Spicer once again said the president will make that announcement when he's ready. So, Jake, the answer still exists. Where are the tapes? Jake.
All right, Jim Acosta, thank you so much. New questions about fired National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and trips he took to the Middle East in 2015. The very latest on the Russia investigation next.
The Lead with...
Pretty explosive suggestion coming from a Democratic senator regarding this Russia investigation. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, believes that fired National Security Advisor Michael Flynn is cooperating with federal investigators. Remember, the Judiciary Committee is leading one of the 5 investigations of any Trump campaign ties with Russia. So here are all the reasons why Senator Whitehouse believes Flynn is talking.
Well, if you draw conclusions as a prosecutor about what we can see from the Flynn investigation, all the signals are suggesting that he's already cooperating with the FBI and may have been for some time. First of all, they had him dead to rights on a felony false statement for the statement that they took from him in the White House about his Kislyak conversations. Second, Comey reported that one of the things that the FBI does with cooperators is to get him to go back and clean up areas of noncompliance. And Flynn, who will never be hired by a foreign government again, went back and cleaned up his Foreign Agent Registration Act filings. Third, all of the reporting on the Eastern District of Virginia subpoenas is one hop away from Flynn. He's like the hole in a donut of subpoenas. And finally, one of the more talkative people in Trump land has gone absolutely dead silent. And that's what prosecutors strongly encourage cooperating witnesses to do. So this would be just another bit of leverage for the prosecutors to make sure that he was cooperating and giving truthful testimony in order to avoid lengthy imprisonment.
Let's start there. With me now, David Jolly, former Florida congressman, Republican, and CNN legal analyst Michael Zeldin, former federal prosecutor who was special assistant to former FBI director, now special counsel, Robert Mueller. So, gentlemen, good to see you in New York. Let's begin with that newsmaking interview with Senator Whitehouse. Michael, to you first. You know, Mueller was your former boss. Right. Would you agree with his assessment that Flynn is cooperating with him?
Maybe, if Flynn has a story to tell. His lawyer long ago, when asked for immunity, said, my client has a story to tell. If he has a story to tell, and that story has to involve people above him in the pecking order, and that really is the president in certain measure. If he has a story to tell, and that story probably has to relate to collusion, then maybe the senator's point is well taken. If the story
you
is
don't sound
not
totally
there,
convinced.
Well, because we don't know anything about what Flynn has to say.
Right.
What we know about Flynn is he's in trouble in the Eastern District of Virginia for his failure to register as a foreign agent. We know that he has been lying to people from the collusion and the SF-86, the security form, and there's got 2 other people, breathing down his neck. So we know he's got a story to tell about himself.
Yeah.
So the question is, who else does he have to tell it about? When we know that, then we'll know whether he's cooperating.
Are you surprised, knowing Congress, the fact that Senator Whitehouse on Senate Judiciary, is talking and saying what he is? I mean, yes, he's a Democrat, but is this at all, do you think his words are impeding the credibility of his investigation at all?
I think it's speculation, right? It's the land of politics, if you will, but understand it. Flynn is the guy that the FBI would want to begin to work with and perhaps offer him if he has something to say. Recall, Michael Flynn's the one person that President Trump continues to try to cover up for. He doesn't want people to touch Michael Flynn. He'll throw everybody else under the bus, it seems.
But should Whitehouse have taken it that far and come out?
I think it's speculation.
Yeah.
I truly do.
Sort of
it might be correct, right? That's the art of speculation, as he might be right.
Let's also, on Flynn, you mentioned the security clearance forms, and this is some of the hot water. Apparently there's now another incident where he may not have been truthful while filling out these security clearance forms. This involves 2 trips to the Middle East. He apparently failed to disclose one of them on his forms. The other trip, he wrote in a hotel that doesn't actually exist. We have 2 Democrats, Congressman Elijah Cummings and Elliot Engel, are seeking more documents in the wake of these 2, trips. Does this, to you, putting down the wrong a hotel that doesn't even exist, is that alarm bells to you, especially knowing that this is a camp that was under all kinds of scrutiny, or no big deal.
I think there's too much of a pattern to chalk this up to incompetence. And it's not just Flynn, it's other administration officials who have also erred in their filings or failed to. Listen, I was a sitting member of Congress who had to file public disclosure forms. And that is a moment, almost like when you're doing your taxes, where you understand you have a responsibility for integrity. Do you get a few things wrong? Sure, but there's an amendment process along the way. But there has been too much omitted from this administration in public filings to simply chalk it up to incompetence. If it all is incompetence, then we got a bigger problem than we realize.
How do you see it?
Well, I see it's the same way. He had one opportunity to get it right, and he didn't. Then he had an opportunity to amend it. And if these stories are correct, and now we're at the second amendment, it doesn't make it look like it's innocent mistakes. And whether you omit or you misstate, they're both lies, and they're both actionable.
We know tomorrow Robert Mueller is meeting with the two leaders of Senate Judiciary, Democrat Dianne Feinstein, Republican Chuck Grassley. They have just agreed that obstruction of justice will actually be in their committee's purview. What will, between Mueller and these senators, will they be comparing notes? I mean, these are two separate investigations, but they all want, all kinds of evidence. How does that work tomorrow?
Well, they have to define their swim lanes. Who is going to do what? What they all remember is what happened in Iran-Contra when Oliver North was immunized, and the prosecutors believed that they could still prosecute, notwithstanding the immunity, and they couldn't. They lost. And that's what Mueller has to make sure, that whatever you guys are going to do in your oversight responsibilities, which is their entitlement, and it's proper within the Judiciary Committee, way more so than intelligence, please don't interfere advertently or inadvertently with what I need to do as a criminal investigation under the mandate that Rosenstein gave me.
Can Senate Judiciary say to Mueller, hey, we want what you have, or is that totally separate?
It depends on how Mueller gets it. If Mueller is subpoenaing it and it's from a grand jury, I don't believe he can give it up.
Okay.
If there's voluntary notes from interviews, maybe they can share.
Okay.
And that's what they'll discuss.
Okay. Lastly, let's throw this up on the screen. This latest CBS News poll finds a third of Americans say President Trump's approach to the Russia investigation has worsened in their opinion of him. You see there, 63% of Americans disapprove of the president's response to the Russia investigation. You're no President Trump fan. We've talked enough for me to know that. But, when will he realize that the handling of this isn't working for him with the American people?
Sean Spicer's answer to that question today was really shocking, to say he hadn't actually sat down to speak with the president
on meddling
and on the Russia matter. And frankly, it stokes a certain suspicion, and rightfully so. It is not a believable statement from the White House press secretary that he hasn't discussed this. And recall, in January, then President-elect acknowledged, he said, I believe Russia hacked the DNC, and look at all the information we got from it, right? So this is a president who continues to shift, and there's a reason the American people have lost confidence in him.
And that's especially true in the aftermath of Comey having said the same thing. So maybe in the run-up to Comey's testimony, you think, well, I've got a lot of things on my plate, I'll get to that. But after Comey says he showed no interest in it, for them, these many weeks later, to be still showing no interest in it,
yeah,
I don't know.
It's an issue. Michael Zeldin and David Jolly, gentlemen, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Let's roll along. Next hour. Top of the hour, you're watching CNN. I'm Brooke Baldwin. Breaking developments on a story that impacts each and every one of us. What's happening with the nation's health care. We are now getting word that the Senate should see text of its version of the American Health Care Act by the end of this week. Remember that the House already passed its bill in May. Remember the victory lap there in May with the House Republicans and the president. All of this plays into the looming deadline that Republican leaders have self-imposed for themselves, a vote before the summer recess begins in July, right? So look at the calendar. That's 8 legislative days remaining. Also moments ago, the White House, in its first on-camera press briefing in 8 days, revealed this about the president's part in forming said legislation.
Has the president seen the draft of the Senate health care bill?
I don't know that. I know that there was some chatter today. I know the president has been on the phone extensively with the leader and with key senators, so I don't know if he's seen the legislation or not, but I know that they've been working extremely hard. And he's very excited about where this thing is headed.
Do you know if anyone on the staff has seen the draft of the bill?
I don't. I know that they are up there working hand in glove with them. So, to the extent that it's, I don't even know, where we are in terms of a final plan. I know that the staff has been working very closely with the leader staff, with Senate Finance and others. So I don't want to get ahead of an announcement on Senator McConnell saying when that final product is done. So I will refer you back to him.
What's more, the leader of the Senate Republicans seemed to confirm Democrats may get very little say on the text of the Senate health care bill.
You say that Democrats aren't interested, but they're not invited into...
Well, they wouldn't. They've made it clear earlier they were not interested in participating in this. They have no interest in it whatsoever. So it makes no sense.
So are they invited into your planning sessions?
Into the Republican conference? No, but they made it clear they're not interested in helping. They are not interested in what we're trying to achieve at all. And I do find it particularly laughable, the complaints about process.
Let's begin with our CNN senior White House correspondent, Jim Acosta, who was in that briefing. Jim, so the White House, let's begin on health care. And we know that the White House talks about how the president wants a bill that, quote unquote, has heart. Do we know what that means?
Yeah, that's in reference, Brooke, to some stories that came out last week from CNN and others that the president was saying behind closed doors to a group of Republican lawmakers that the bill coming out of the House to repeal and replace Obamacare was, quote, mean and needed to have some heart. And so that was Sean Spicer acknowledging during the briefing today that the president did have that criticism of this health care bill. And so it is interesting that the White House is acknowledging that. It makes you wonder what they're going to say once the Senate health care bill, once it ever comes out, is scored by the Congressional Budget Office. And I expect it to still show millions and millions of Americans potentially losing health care coverage as a result of that bill being signed into law. And so that's going to be another question for this White House to answer. But as you heard and you just played there a few moments ago, the president, or at least Sean Spicer, can't say whether the president has even looked at this legislation, but it does appear he has an opinion on it and he's expressing it.
So a couple questions on health care, also a couple questions in the wake of Otto Warmbier's death, coming back after being 17 months detained in North Korea. This young American student dies yesterday. The president just tweeted about North Korea. What did he say?
Yeah, we can put this up on screen if you have it. If not, I can just read it to you. He tweeted a few moments ago, while I greatly appreciate the efforts of President Xi and China to help with North Korea, it has not worked out. At least I know China tried. Brooke, that's in reference to what has essentially been the president's strategy since the beginning days of this administration, which is not to punish China on trade, which is something he promised to do during the campaign, in exchange for Chinese cooperation with respect to North Korea. And what the president seems to be acknowledging there in that tweet is that that did not work. And so it is sort of interesting to, when you look back at what the president said earlier today in that meeting with the Ukrainian president, and then what Sean Spicer said during the briefing a few moments ago, where they're right up to the edge of blaming the Obama administration for not doing enough to secure the release of Otto Warmbier. And yet right after this briefing is over, the president is saying, well, this other thing I tried over here with China and prodding China to pressure North Korea, that didn't work. So I think this is going to continue to be a question for the Trump administration moving forward. Was this the right idea? Was this the best idea in terms of trying to put pressure on North Korea? Because the president gave away a lot of trade sanctions on China that he promised during the campaign in exchange for Chinese cooperation on this issue, and he didn't get it.
Jim Acosta, thank you. Another big briefing, a big topic in that briefing was Georgia, the Georgia 6th Congressional District. Voting has been underway in the most expensive House race in U.S. history. Much of America is watching this pivotal election, including President Trump. Democrats are pushing this race as a referendum on his presidency, and President Trump certainly hasn't shied away from tweeting about the race. This morning, he took a shot at the Democrat trying to win the seat that has been solid red since 1979. Here's a tweet from the president. Democrat John Ossoff, who wants to raise your taxes to the highest level and is weak on crime and security, doesn't even live in the district. Let's bring in someone who knows this race very, very well. Greg Bluestein is back with us today. He's a political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And Greg, obviously turnout is key. And I'm also hearing that you're dealing with some bad weather in this part of Georgia.
Yeah, there's flash flood warnings today. There's traffic all over Atlanta's highways, which is not too big of a surprise, but the streets are clogged with rain. So there's a question about how that will dampen turnout today.
What did you think, just so we just moving off of the weather and onto, the president, we showed his tweet from earlier this morning, and yet you have Sean Spicer in the briefing moments ago saying, don't read too much into it with regard to this, mega expensive 6th district race.
Yeah, by the way, we're at more than $50 million. We could get to $60 million when all the tallies counted up. But no, Trump has clouded everything about this race from really the beginning, where both candidates are both talking about, they're saying they're talking about local issues. Really, it's a national debate, and most voters are talking about Trump as well. This is a district that Trump narrowly won. Just in November, it probably would not be competitive at all if not for questions about Trump. And John Ossoff, the Democrat in the race, has capitalized on that. He's used his Make Trump Furious platform at the beginning of the campaign to help raise $23 million plus.
Also, I think what really fascinates me about this district specifically is the women, that the suburban educated moms. You have a lot of them in the 6th district, and these are the women who, as we pointed out for years and years, had voted Republican. But last November, a lot of them actually voted for Hillary Clinton.
And that's what made this district so close in November. And Ossoff, it's fascinating because